You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is August 17th, 2025, and this is another episode of Lighthearted Light, where we look back at interviews from more than 6 years and more than 300 episodes of this podcast. Today we're going to listen to an edited version of an interview that was first heard in episode 83 back in October 2020. Our subject is Greens Ledge Lighthouse in Norwalk, Connecticut, and the conversation is with the father and son team that's been very involved in its restoration and preservation. Greens Ledge Light, which was built in 1902, is a cast iron lighthouse tower on a cylindrical cast iron concrete-filled foundation. It's typical of offshore lighthouses built in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Male keepers lived inside the lighthouse tower. Under the provisions of the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act, the lighthouse was auctioned in 2016. The high bid was placed by a group of local residents that included the Pettee family. They formed a 501c3 organization, the Greens Ledge Light Preservation Society. Tim Pettee, who is president of the Greens Ledge Light Preservation Society, grew up in Westport, Connecticut, and has been a resident of Rowayton, Connecticut since 2014. Tim's son, Alex Pettee, is the treasurer of the Greens Ledge Light Preservation Society. Let's listen to my conversation with Tim and Alex Pettee now. What made you decide to buy a lighthouse?
We're lifelong residents of this area. I've sailed and, been in Long Island Sound waters, since I was a kid, and bringing up my family, we did the same, either sail or power. And one day we were out by Greens Ledge and Alex was with me, and my daughter said that, of course, she was buried in her phone, even offshore. And she said, "Dad, Greens Ledge is for sale." And I said, "Well, gee, I didn't think they sold those things. That sounds very unusual." And of course, she wanted to buy it, and Alex was encouraging as well. And so we looked into it. We registered for the GSA auction. I was surprised that we won Greens Ledge. There were only a few bidders, and our winning bid was such that the GSA came back to us and said, "Gee, that's not the price we had in mind. Can you up your bid?" And of course we did. And we became the designees, the proud owners of Greens Ledge. We teamed up with one of the other bidders, a local restaurateur by the name of Brendan McGee. It seemed a great partnership and has been a great partnership. So we got together and we formed a nonprofit called the Greens Ledge Light Preservation Society. And the Pettee family donated the light to that nonprofit. And since then, we've been off and running with what we believe is really going to be an epic restoration.
What kind of condition was the lighthouse in when you bought it?
It was listed as in poor condition. And this was a couple years after what was really the closest cousin to Greens Ledge, which was Old Orchard Light in Staten Island. That actually came down during Hurricane Sandy. It was most similar to Greens Ledge in its structure. I think it was built, 1 year earlier. I think it was literally like the same construction team. It was the same blueprints. And so, I think that fact kind of spooked a lot of potential buyers. The fact that its closest comp kind of recently came down. And so, so it wasn't in great condition. It was, there are major issues with the lower caisson area. Our kind of target was to kind of in the first couple of years to really kind of try to tackle those major issues to that lower caisson portion.
And I understand there were some emergency repairs that were carried out related to that caisson. Is that right?
Yeah, there was extensive kind of metal repair work done. It included, welding kind of new stainless steel plates and bands. And so that really was the kind of bulk of that kind of stabilization process, which was kind of the first 2 years of the restoration.
You created a fundraising campaign that's raised more than $1.7 million. Is that an accurate figure at this time?
I think that is an accurate figure as of today, 1.7. Yeah.
Okay. That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Has that been mostly through local donations? How have you raised so much money? It's really impressive.
It's I'd say 98% of it is local. There's a few donors, not from the Connecticut area, who are dedicated preservationists, obviously. But we're really blessed in this community with not only preservationists, who have actively donated, but the community has responded. And Alex and I created that campaign, a keepers campaign, if you will. We felt some urgency, Jeremy, and conveyed that urgency to the community. And that was on the heels of Old Orchard coming down, because we really, as stewards, once we won the auction and we created the society, we were not going to let it come down. So job one was to prevent it from falling, from keeping it standing, because otherwise it would have been a blight on the community. It would have reflected poorly on Darien and Norwalk and the little village of Rowayton, where we are. So we reached out to the shorefront homeowners, who frankly had the most to lose. They would lose their beautiful view of this light that's a mile offshore. And so we got a very, I think by the end of 2017, when we started fundraising, by reaching out to those shorefront homeowners, I think we had about $1 million circle, either donated or pledged. And these were people that were preservationists, obviously interested in the well-being of Long Island Sound and the light. And we did say to those significant donors in 2017, and we've said to the significant donors, that you are restoring, you are preserving this icon. And for that, we'll see that you can have some form of access. And people responded to that. But it's really been preservationists and restoration. People are interested in the restoration of the light. And but we are blessed to be in a community that has resources, quite frankly, and they responded. And we were very gratified by that response.
What is your ultimate fundraising goal? Do you have a number in mind for a full restoration of the lighthouse?
Well, we think the restoration itself will be $1.8 million, the costs. However, we want to endow the light. We want to see that when we're done with the work and the last painter or welder leaves the riprap, that the light has some capital for ongoing operations, which should be very minimal. It's not going to be manned. Nobody's going to be living there. But there are ongoing costs, whether it be insurance or painting. And so we are aiming to raise $2 million in total. And that will endow the light, we think, for many years after the construction is done. So right now we're in kind of our last push, the push to get over the top, to finish the restoration. And in the process, if we can get to 2 million, there'll be pretty much a guaranteed future that the light will continue to reflect positively on the community.
On your organization's website, it talks about the, quote, next 100 years, unquote, vision for the lighthouse. What exactly is that vision for the next 100 years?
Yeah, so the kind of overall kind of fundraising model was to kind of prevent what we saw kind of happen with other kind of restorations, and that you kind of restore it once, you have this big drive, it's big campaign, you restore it once, and then, it stops being used, and then it kind of falls back in that kind of same cycle. And it kind of pushes that, it kind of fuels just that cycle. And so our thinking was that to kind of break that cycle, and kind of keep it in really good condition. It needs to be functional. It kind of needs to be this kind of community asset. And so, so this kind of next 100 years is kind of the kind of programming of our org, and it includes having the Light be a kind of active participant in the community, hosting local community things, whether it's a swim or a sail race, and other kind of educational tours.
What are the goals as far as public access?
We do envision, in fact, we hope to start work on a dock that we have been permitted for. And that dock will be large enough to accommodate a large boat. We are in talks with the Maritime Aquarium of Norwalk, which is about 2 or 3 miles away. And they do lighthouse tours on their vessel, Spirit of the Sound. None of their tours include visits, inside. They basically just circle the many lights of Long Island Sound. They go down to Throgs Neck and they go up, up past New Haven. So we're hoping to offer, their customers, their audience, an opportunity to land at Green's Ledge and visit the tower. And so the public access will be, we hope, we don't have an agreement yet, but we'll get there, through the Maritime Aquarium. It's, as I said, it's not totally hospitable, right now with riprap and a ladder. And in fact, it is not a public park, right? So the public access will be either through the Maritime Aquarium or another agency that will do that for us. We want to be keepers of the Light and not be in kind of the ferry business or the shuttle business. And there are several good local providers of Long Island Sound seaborne visits. Maritime's just one of them. Seaport Association's another one. And we're going to team up with one of them to provide that limited public access. But there will be public access, to be sure.
That sounds great. And the partnership with the Maritime Aquarium sounds ideal, really.
Yes.
In the past, I don't know if you know, I've actually narrated some of those cruises for them, the Lighthouse cruises. When they first started them, I did the first few.
Oh,
haven't
good.
been back in a couple of years now. But when they start stopping at Green's Ledge Lighthouse, I hope they invite me back to be part of that.
I'll make sure of it, Chair.
I would love that so much. I'm a few hours away from you, but I can make the trip down there.
It'll be worth it.
Absolutely. Tell me about the electric and plumbing systems, and I'm not quite sure where that stands right now. Have the new electric and plumbing systems been installed, or is that in the process of happening, or what's going on with that?
So the kind of systems planning and installation is actually just starting now. The crew was just down for a few days last week, and they're coming down to really begin work next week. And what we're really looking to do is kind of restore the essential kind of systems, that were, so critical for that manned lighthouse experience, from 1902 to 1972. And so it's kind of a very similar plumbing system. It's pretty basic kind of power system, but all fueled by all solar power now, right? So it was historically fueled at one point by oil, and then it was coal. And so we're kind of looking to kind of revive those kind of living systems, which we kind of see as kind of a critical part of the restoration of, it is a lighthouse. And so kind of those living systems really are kind of a critical part of that restoration.
We've contracted with Northeast Marine out of the New Bedford, Massachusetts area. Jerry, maybe you are familiar with them. They were very involved in the Graves Light restoration work that was done several years ago and done so well. Very capable group. We're looking forward to perhaps concluding not only the electrical, but then the plumbing, right? Because the light keepers obviously had plumbing. And we're hoping we might be able to get that done by the end of the year.
That's fantastic. Yeah, based on the work that's been done at Graves Light in that area, you guys are, you've chosen the right company to work with on that.
That's good to hear.
So I know some other work has happened fairly recently. The lighthouse has been repainted.
The exterior, we did a contest online where people could vote for the color that they wanted. Now the color was to be red, so we posted various shades of red. I forget what the other ones were. It was like Nantucket red and Hilton Head red. There were all sorts of different reds, right?
Yeah, the ultimate shading choice was consistent with the early 1900s shading, which was more of a true red. It had kind of gotten darker and darker and darker, especially post automation, post 1970. It seems that it was dark because it didn't have to be painted as often. To bring it back to more of the original kind of true red shading seemed to be really consistent with the overall kind of restoration.
The actual color was a Pittsburgh paint, and it had the funny name of Red Gumball. We've received very, very favorable reviews on Red Gumball. A lot of thumbs up, a lot of likes from all over. People stop us on the street, and say, "Love the red, love the red." So far, so good. We hope to keep it as bright and brilliant as it is today.
So far, what would you say has been the biggest obstacle to restoration or moving forward? What do you see as the biggest obstacle?
Anyone with an offshore project figures out very quickly that it's very different than an onshore restoration. It's a whole different thing, and getting workers out there and scheduling. Every kind of process needs to be very carefully planned because, each barge day is very expensive. And so you really need to be able to kind of coordinate and get that transportation, all that stuff that, on an onshore project, it's not even a consideration. But, for the offshore project, we probably spend 80% of the time just figuring out that, that kind of stuff. So I think that's something that is kind of just the inherent challenge, with the offshore lighthouse restoration.
And we brought in some very accomplished people from your neighborhood, Jeremy, North Point Marine, which is out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They do a lot of work with, I think, Coast Guard and Navy, repair work. They're skilled, accomplished metal workers. And what we found, was obviously a lot of patch stuff had to be done. And this is, 1902 cast iron. It's not like they're making this stuff anymore. So as they, their skills were definitely required in this. But as Alex has mentioned a couple times, not only the patches, but the bands, both at the upper level of the caisson and as far down to water level. We actually pulled back riprap to get as far down as we could, right? Because that is a 30-foot cast iron structure. And we got down, almost halfway, and there's a very strong 18-inch stainless steel band with hundreds of bolts that encircles the entire caisson. So it was patch and then preserve and rehabilitate in the name of restoration, because just patching it is not enough. So we think with these bands that are below and up top, and then some kind of girdles on two places, that we've restored the integrity of the caisson.
So just to go back for a minute about the early history of the lighthouse, there was a very famous incident that I've actually written in my book on Connecticut lighthouses and a couple of articles I've written about this. There was a time in 1910 when an assistant keeper named Leroy Lowborough was abandoned by the head keeper, John Kiarskin, for 11 days. Lowborough nearly starved to death. It's an incredible story. There's a lot more to it than what I just said, but won't tell the whole story right now. But when you're at the lighthouse, do you find yourself thinking about that incident and in general about the lives of the keepers who live there?
Oh, absolutely. And, one of the things that the family, my daughter's working on is getting a list, which is not hard, of all the keepers, that were manning the light. And she's actually started a project on one of the genealogy sites, trying to find relatives of the keepers. Of course, the last keeper left in 1972. We're told that at its peak, there were 3 people manning the light, 2 assistants and one senior. And one of our donors told a great story, an elderly man who grew up in Rowayton. And he told a great story that when he was a kid, he would go out to the light and visit the keepers. He and his mother would bring pies, and the keepers loved the pies. And he recalled vividly, and this man is, I think, in his 80s at this point, he recalled vividly the layout. He recalled that the galley on the first level, the assistant keeper's room, residence, if you will, on the second level, the keeper's main room, then the watch room, and he recalled all this. And so as we embark, and he also said whenever the keepers were off watch, they would come by, they would come into the 5 Mile River in Rowayton and certainly pay a visit to his house and get some more of his mother's pie when they were off duty. But we've kept this in mind in terms of the restoration. So we envision, a galley on the first level, an assistant keeper's bedroom on 2, which will have a couple bunks, main keeper on 3, or head keeper, quote unquote, watch room. Although every time we're out there, we kind of debate whether the watch room should be the keeper's residence, and because it's such a beautiful, particularly in its restored state with the porthole lights, it's such a beautiful room. But we always we want to keep the tradition alive. That's what preservation is all about. It's history. It's living history that we've been able to help save for the community, and part of that is the keepers that were there. So we envision, exhibits. The local historical society has a keeper's log from a period of time. We hope to be able to borrow that to display for tours. So we're constantly keeping that manned experience in mind as part of this restoration, because otherwise it would all be gone and it would just be memories. We feel confident the light's going to be standing, the tower will be standing for the next 100 years. And part of that is the memory, of the keepers that will stay with it.
This is great. I just love hearing that kind of thing, that the human history is being very much taken into account.
Yes.
That's great to hear. What do you think Greens Ledge Lighthouse, you've kind of touched on this to some degree already, but what do you think the lighthouse means to the local community? And part 2 of that question is, why does it need to be saved?
Well, there was and still is a rich history of boating and shipping in this area. Now, Norwalk Harbor saw, 100 years ago, a fantastic level of commerce, not unusual along the Connecticut shore. A lot, and being in close proximity, we're 50 miles from New York City. A lot of that commerce, into Norwalk Harbor, Bridgeport Harbor, and of course on up the Sound, was kind of emanating from the metropolitan area of New York City. And so there is a rich coastal history to Norwalk, Connecticut. Now, less commerce, even the lobstermen have moved away, and more pleasure boating, a lot of pleasure boating, sailing and the like. But the Lighthouse, Greens Ledge, is a monument to that history of commerce and boating, that goes back to the 18th century. And to lose that, as so often happens with historical buildings that people take for granted, to lose that, you lose that piece of history. And then it's just a memory, and that memory fades as generations pass. And so what we have felt from when we got started with this is that Greens Ledge the memory will not fade. It's going to be standing. That's what we've set out to do. Before a drop of paint was applied, we wanted to make sure that this structure would not come down like Old Orchard and so many others. And so what it means to the community is a lot. And I've said often that it reflects on us as a community. Yes, there's a bright red and white beacon, but it reflects on us to see that standing and reflects positively on us as a community that we value our history. Our generation, I think, has done a great job of tackling these lighthouse projects, obviously via the Lighthouse Act of 2000, where these were made available, to private hands. But it's really up to the next generation to keep this going. And as you've probably, and your listeners have probably already figured out, Alex is my son. And I'm looking forward to Alex, carrying that, that tradition, the lighthouse tradition onward. And as our donors have come forward, many of them have said, gee, can my children be involved? And I'm like, absolutely. That's why we're doing this, so that your children are involved, not just looking at it, but maintaining that preservation, so that in another 100 years, when maybe it needs a little work, there's going to be a foundation upon which that can be done. That's what it's all about.
That's a great point, that you as father and son, in a way, are representative of the passing of the torch to the next generation. We need young people to get involved, obviously, if lighthouses are going to be saved for posterity. I have one final question. Again, either or both of you can take this, but this is for bonus points. What has been your favorite thing about your involvement with Greens Ledge Lighthouse?
I'd say my favorite thing has been dealing with the community and the response from the community and meeting people that care. That's been most gratifying to me.
Yeah, there have been so few of these kind of restorations done, and they're all different, and every project kind of requires kind of this creative process to it, right? It's a creative process to try to figure out how to get the materials out there, how to get the workers out there, and how to kind of do this, in a way that, that nobody really knows 100% sure kind of what should be done, kind of how it should be done. And so it's always this kind of continual kind of creative process of kind of going through different concepts and kind of trying to kind of work together to kind of solve this bigger issue.
In addition to treasurer, Alex is pretty much the de facto project manager and has done a great job orchestrating those many, many different, some are big projects, some are smaller projects, but he does a great job at organizing them and getting the creative thinking. How are we going to solve this problem? Because it is a mile offshore. It's not sitting out here down the street. It's a mile offshore, and that's a whole another set of issues.
Thank you so much, Alex Pettee and Tim Pettee.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You can learn more about the Greens Ledge Lighthouse Preservation Society at savegreensledge.org. There's a virtual tour on the site, as well as a gallery of restoration photos. After completing their 5-year Save the Light campaign, the Society has turned their focus to their next 100 years vision. They're fundraising for the acquisition of a boat with world-class capabilities and safety features to replace their aging workboats. The boat would also facilitate marine research and education. The Greens Ledge Light Preservation Society has partnered with the Norwalk Seaport Association for occasional tours. This year's 3 dates have passed, but there will be more next year. The lighthouse is also available for private events like weddings and business meetings. Also, you can stay overnight at Greens Ledge during special Night at the Light events, which happen about 5 to 10 times each year. That's it for this edition of Lighthearted Light. I want to remind everyone to visit uslhs.org to learn more about preservation grants, the Passport Program, domestic and international tours, the online research catalog, and everything else the Society offers. If you're involved with preserving lighthouses or any historic buildings, thank you for what you do. Our history matters, and we're all on the same team. We'll be back with a new episode of Lighthearted next Sunday with special guest Darlene Chisholm. Darlene has photographed more than 4,000 lighthouses, many of them on U.S. Lighthouse Society tours. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and keep a good light.